Okay, hello people out there in internet land. Tonight, London Under is talking about the tea with the black dragon with its beautiful cover. Actually, it's one of the beautiful covers. There was multiples. This is the only one that was available though when I purchased my copy. So this one is by R.A. MacAvoy, which was published in the 1980s at some point. I think it was 1984. Not sure. 1983. I was close. Not too bad for not looking.
I only know because they read it at the end of, because I listened to it and they went, publishing date 1983. So there you go.
Right, it was stuck in your brain, yes. Whereas I only went and looked at it a few days ago because, I don't know, I think Kirsten might have mentioned that it was older and I was like, I hadn't realised it was that old. So
that's also what I was doing. Anyway, we'll get to that.
So this was a pick that we picked through voting for mini read. So this is just a novella. It's not very long. And shall we start off with impressions? Sarah.
I had good fun. I think same thing as you said, Mel. I actually had no idea when this was set. I knew it was, someone said it's an older novel, but I kind of, when you listen to it, there's no mobile phones, so you're going, okay. But and they're talking about her being a systems, one of the characters is a systems analyst, and they're into, computers and all this kind of stuff, and still very relevant. But it was also like, I was like, is this the 1990s? Is this the 80s? Like, it was really hard to place, which is good in some ways, because I do think that has a little bit of a timeless feel. I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it. There was definitely things in it that language wise that did date it a bit, and we'll talk about that soon. But I liked it. I was surprised that the mythology wasn't as integrated as I thought it was going to be from the jacket, like the pitch, like the summary that kind of sold me on it. I thought it was going to be a bit more integrated, but it was still good. And it's a whodunit mystery that's totally up my alley. So yeah, I had a good time. And I listened to it. I have some. I thought it was a good narrator. I had some issues with the direction as the director or editor, maybe. And I'll talk about that in a minute. But it actually was really, really nice to listen to, and I would also recommend it as an audio book for a novella like this, because I know sometimes they can be hit and miss. So yeah,
awesome. Kirsten?
I did the ebook, not the audio book. I quite liked it, but I didn't love it, which I think was probably more to do with my expectations than the book itself, because I was like, I wanted more dragon and I wanted more romance, and that was not what this book was, which was not any fault of the book, but more the fault of my expectations. And I'm not, I sort of got that mystery / thriller kind of vibe, and I'm not a huge fan of that genre. But I did enjoy the characters, and I like quite a lot of things about it. So it's just that it's probably not really I probably won't go and keep reading, but I got through it quite fine and was interested to find out the end, and so it's more just that I'm not a huge mystery thriller type person.
Yeah, I'm pretty similar. I haven't figured it out. I only just finished it this afternoon. I haven't quite settled on where I want to rate it, and I think the discussion tonight will probably settle me on that one a bit more. I agree. I wasn't expecting it to be what it was, but I was fine with what it was. I would have liked a little bit more dragon. At the very least. The romance was fine, but a little more dragon would have been nice. But I was fine with it. And I ended up really liking the characters by the end. By the end, I was like, I'm really actually enjoying the characters. I just thought, personally, the structuring was weird. I was like, is this Martha's story, or is this, is his name Main?
Long.
Yeah, let's go long. Long's story. I wasn't quite sure, and it didn't switch it around enough to sort of say it was both. And yet it started with her quite solidly, and then suddenly it was his story. And I got why she shifted it, but I was, when I say that she, I mean the author, I got why she shifted it, but I felt like it would have been better if she just stuck with the dragon's perspective. Then that didn't fit the name well, then the title well. So, but I honestly, by the end, I just didn't care. I was just like, stop. I didn't worry about it anymore. I was enjoying both of them, and I even quite liked the daughter, even though I kind of found her quite annoying. I still liked her, which was weird. So, yeah. Anyway, I thought it was a reasonable read. I have already looked up where I can purchase a matching cover for the second book. I haven't purchased it yet, though, because I can only buy it secondhand, and it's not cheap. It's not too bad, but it's not cheap.
Yeah.
So we'll see if that happens.
So is there more books? Is this a series?
Just one more. So it's a duology.
Right. Although, to be honest, it struck me as a good standalone. Like, I didn't realize when Kirsten said, I'm not going to read ahead, I was like going, okay, I didn't know you could read ahead. That's news to me. Or maybe, you knew something I thought maybe you meant just the author. Like, you weren't interested in reading more from the author. Yeah. Okay, cool.
Yeah, I agree.
Sorry.
I was just going to say, I agree. I think that it did end well, which is probably part of the reason why I'm not reading on, because it's not my favorite genre, and because I was happy with. I found it was quite round out at the end and tied up.
It's a very satisfactory ending. Yeah.
I think that I'll probably have to do a little more research on the book. I don't care about spoilers. In fact, I would dispute this being a mystery in some respects, because it's really kind of midway that you've got it all figured out anyway. So there's no like it was more thrillery, maybe. I don't know. I don't know how to describe the ending.
From mystery to adventure. Yeah,
I'd say thriller as well. Like the whole part where they're like in the back of the boot of the car, and and he's in the what's his name's house and things like that. And then on the boat at the end, climbing through the ventilation system, and the guy's firing the gun at him and stuff. And I was thinking this I could see this being made into an action movie in like the late 80s, early 90s, that kind of time period.
That style, yeah. No, I agree. That would have been good. But but apparently the second one is also a mystery, also around Martha again. And so I'm sort of like, I'm not sure. I'm going to have to look into it and figure it out. And I don't care if I spoil myself in the process, because I think what would get me to go on and read is that I enjoyed the characters and I would like to see more of them, because I think, Kirsten, you said you wanted more romance. I would like to, I don't necessarily need more romance, but I would have liked to have them spend more time together. But from what I'm able to tell, I'm not 100% sure that they will spend more time with it in the next book. So together. So that would kill my reason for wanting to read it. So we'll see.
Yeah.
Mel, did you listen to the audio, or you read the physical copy?
So we all consumed it in a different media.
In the physical copy, did they have the same thing that is in the ebook, where it literally shifts perspectives in the middle of a paragraph?
Yes, it did that.
No, not even a line break.
Not even a line, nothing.
I was like, hang on, who the fuck is this again?
That was my criticism. I thought that was an editor issue in the order.
No, it's the way the book does it.
Oh my God, because
I would argue that's still an editor issue.
Yeah.
Because an editor should have fixed that.
Yeah, I think so too. Personally, I think so too. Like both a publisher editor and the Audible editor, because I would actually sit there going, hang on, what? And I actually had to rewind several times to figure out where I was. That was the bit I was going to say to you guys, is like, my criticism with the audio bit was that the editor never put any, like just pause. Like,
was it just me, or was it mostly in the beginning that happened?
No, because I noticed it at the end as well.
Okay, maybe I just didn't notice it so much at the end.
Because they went from Long, they suddenly went back to Liz, and I was like, hang on, are we with what? And then we went over to Fish. Is his name Fish? Richard Fish?
I think so.
Yeah, then we were with Fish. And
Fred Fish.
At least at that point. Frisch. At least at that point. Oh, sorry. Oh, I'm in the middle of things. Sorry.
That one's got a break. I think that's what I had at the end. Towards the end, I was getting breaks like this, but I didn't have them in the beginning.
There were quite a few towards the second half that I noticed, because I hadn't picked up on it exactly at the beginning. Like, I think I'd just hadn't noticed that was what was making it confusing, because I'd be
Right.
like, hang on, who are we back to this other person again? And I hadn't even noticed. It took me a little while to notice that it's like there's not even a line break. Why is there not a line break in between a new? Like usually when it's a whole new person, like I'm quite used to a lot of the books that I read, they switch to a whole new chapter when it's another character's point of view.
Yeah.
Whereas I don't need it to be a new chapter, but a line break in between. Like this didn't even have that. It was just continuing on in the paragraph, which you would think that the Audible one they could have kind of made that better by having like a different voice,
a pause,
character.
or just a pause.
Yeah.
Like, because I guess I'm so used to, I mean, and that's the thing. It took me a moment to figure it out, and I finally worked it out today. I'm like, oh, for God's sake, take a breath, like just pause. You do it on the chapters, but you're not doing it anywhere else. And I thought it was I really did think it was the editor or the director had not bothered, and it sounds like it's an actual problem with the publisher on this.
Because I'd wondered whether it was when it was digitized that they'd missed something, but
right,
not.
yeah. So apparently not.
I think that it happens. I could be wrong, and because I noticed it happening, but I didn't cognitively go and make a note of it, if that makes sense. I just remember having that problem and having to go back over a couple of times to figure out what had happened there. So just like you said, Sarah, but without the rewind. But
I remember it distinctly happening at about the time. Sorry, go Mel.
Oh no,
when they were like when all the action stuff was going on, and they were going to go and try and find Martha, and then him and the daughter were in the back of the car, and then it had jumped to Martha and she was getting bashed up by those dudes, and then it had jumped back. Like it did all of that without any lines in between, because I was just like,
that's when I actually out loud in the backyard said, oh, for God's sake, take a breath, woman, which because I had a female.
Yeah. Well, as far as I can tell, looking, the breaks seem to be when it's either a change in time or a change in scene. So when they've actually put a physical break, it's a change in time or scene, but not a change of perspective.
Yeah.
That's just from a quick flick, because I didn't really register it as I was going, apart from like going, oh, I feel confused.
That's interesting. And I don't know whether that's no, it isn't. It can't be a thing from the 80s. It must have been.
I actually think it might be a thing from the 80s, because I'm thinking back, and there's a Tamora Pierce book that I read, and I'm pretty sure a similar thing might have happened in that.
It's possible that editors have just gotten better at picking up on stuff like this and telling all you need to signal to readers. And maybe we've gotten soft and we've gotten so used to getting these signals that we don't.
But it is hard, because when you're imagining, you're imagining the scene, and then suddenly a character appears in that scene who wasn't there, and you're like, no, hey, well, did they walk in the room? Oh no, hang on, it's from their perspective. Are they in the room now? No, they're not. They're somewhere else. It is very disconcerting, because your brain hasn't been given the chance to actually go, like in a movie, and see, right, move to the next bit. Like there's nothing to do that. And I honestly kept thinking, oh, someone walked in, or because actually I remember another it happening where, I remember exactly the first time it happened, when we switched to Long's perspective in his room. I couldn't figure out how we got there. I remember thinking we were starting to go around the room and how nice it was, and I was like going, hang on, is this Martha's room? Hang on, no, is she in there? I was really confused. And I had to rewind to actually go, oh, it's his room. And then it was a couple more toes before I went, that she's just not giving us a chance to go, we've changed perspective, we're in a different place. It was really, okay. It's interesting that we've all had that exact experience, because that was my thing I was going to say. That's my criticism with the
But I mean, overall, it didn't destroy my enjoyment. Like I wasn't.
No, I just had to rewind a lot, and my enjoyment wasn't with the writing. It was simply just, I just needed my brain to rest a little bit between each bit.
I think that would have been harder in audio because I did reread a lot. When I'd hit those spots, I always went back and went, hang on, what? And then realised.
Yeah. Because you
It's
just
just
done exactly the
easier
same
to
thing,
do
though.
in a book. Like I do it in a book without even really thinking about the fact that I'm rereading a line that didn't quite register. But in audio, it's so much harder to rewind and it's
Oh, it's not so bad. I just tap my ear because I have.
Yeah, see, I listen in the car, and sometimes in the car when I hit the back button, it doesn't do the 15 seconds or whatever. It does like a whole chapter. And then so I just don't touch it anymore because then I don't, like, if I'm driving, I don't want to be fart-assing around with the buttons and then going, oh shit, now I've pressed this too far, and I'm looking at the thing instead of looking at the road.
That's where it happened.
Don't when I'm driving.
That's exactly where the first thing happened. I remember exactly where I was driving. I was driving down Sydney Park Road, and we've changed perspective, we've changed scene location, and I remember going, what was I not paying attention? Like sometimes that happens too, and then I actually sat there and had to rewind and went, oh no, it wasn't. Okay, that's fine. Right now, okay, now I know we changed. And I didn't even think that it was going to be a problem. I just thought it's a one-off, but it kept happening. So that's really interesting. Anyway, sounds like we all had the same experience, regardless of the medium that we enjoyed it in.
Yeah, well, that's fascinating too. Although I suppose Kirsten and mine's medium's not all that different, so really.
But that you actually had a printed copy, you know, like as Kirsten said, she thought, so maybe something went wrong in digitizing it, whereas, you know.
Which does happen,
Yeah.
I must admit, I actually found it a lot longer than I thought it was going to be because looking at it, it looks super thin.
Oh, yeah.
The text is quite dense on the page compared to most modern published books.
Woo, yeah. That's because there's no scene breaks.
Well, there were still chapters, so that's something. But it was pretty dense, and it's actually quite a tall book for its size too.
I was going to say, can you open that up again, Mel? Show us. Those are not big margins.
No, they're not. No. It's all the way to the edges. It's not a normal publisher. It's from a publisher I've never heard of before called Open Road. So I don't know if it's because of them or whether it's because it's an older book or what, but it's definitely. So this book was 128 pages. So I was like, oh, I'm going to burn through this. No, not so much.
Yeah.
And I kept thinking.
When was it printed?
This one was printed. Oh, it doesn't actually say. It's got its copyright date, but it doesn't have a printing. Oh, wait. This edition published 2014.
Interesting. That is interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, because like the understanding of, you know, space on a page to give focus and to rest the eyes, you know, so because it is a lot harder to read a lot of dense text than it is to read something that's, you know.
But it would make sense for a small publishing group to want to use less paper.
Oh, totally. And especially if it's not. But I just also thought it was an interesting point. If it's 2014, it's not like this idea of understanding typesetting is a new phenomenon, as it were. Whereas in the 80s, I can imagine, because I feel like to your point, I do feel there was a lot of some of the typesetting. It's gotten like it was a lot more like that. Some of the books I remember, some childhood novels and things, or books for children. But as we grew up, I do remember them like they were a lot more spaced out. And I think a lot of that kind of was like, why are we just doing this for kids? Actually, this is really helpful for adults as well. And so a lot of this typesetting and accessibility and understanding that adult eyes, you know, especially as you get older and, you know, you don't want to have fonts too small. I think we've made so many advances. So I thought maybe your copy might have been from an earlier time, but apparently not.
No, it's that's one of the reasons why I had no idea that it was so old. I don't know where I heard about it. Maybe it just came up in a recommendation on Goodreads. I don't know. And I just went, that sounds like my kind of book with a title like that, which it, you know, of course. Yeah, I'm just guessing that it's because it's a small independent and sometimes they don't follow the same rules. But I must admit the font, while not quite small enough to require me to get my glasses out, it was getting close.
Yeah.
Which is saying something because I don't wear them very often.
Yeah. sorry.
So going to the story itself.
Yeah.
I think I would have liked it pacing wise if she'd spent a little bit more time with Martha and Long getting to know each other.
Yeah, I did that usual, but I kind of went, oh, well, you know, it is what it is, and they're older. But I did that whole kind of you don't really know each other to have fallen in love thing. Maybe he feels this because he's been around the block quite a few times. But I did think for someone whose husband had walked out on her and taken all the cash, who'd never remarried or never had, didn't seem to have any further lovers or boyfriends. It was all a bit quick and sudden, as it were. But I also just went, oh, look, I also just kind of went, it's romantic. It is what it is. I'm not going to be this person sitting here being the cynical lady in her 40s, you know.
It wasn't so much that I needed it, or I felt like it needed it. It was more like I would have enjoyed it if it had a little bit of that.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I agree. I think that was the bit that I enjoyed their relationship the most, and I enjoyed it also from that they were doing things that I like, you know, like they were having dinner, you know, in a nice hotel with a nice view, and I was like, oh, this sounds nice. They're having lobster. I was like, yeah, I'm up for this. And they're taking tea in his rooms with all his books. Sounds great. I was down for all of that. That sounds very nice. Yeah. Trying to think. I thought the characters we met along the way was kind of cool.
Yeah.
I
quite liked I thought it was a little bit bow tied up with the Fred Fish stuff at the end, but I quite enjoyed him as a character up until that, and then I was just like a little bit not badly rolled-eyed, but just a little bit like because honestly I do not think he matches Liz. I can see why Fred was interested, but I don't know, maybe after the experience Liz will be a different person, but I didn't feel like we'd seen that.
I thought that Liz, she's a character I would like to talk about, because despite her saying, oh, everyone's saying how smart and all this kind of stuff she was, and how she didn't get, you know, and there was this area where she was talking about not having friends because they wanted stuff from her and everything. She at the same time was this very naive character who got like completely what's the word I'm looking for? She was
blindsided?
No, it wasn't blindsided. She was charmed. She was basically charmed and suckered. She suckered into being the fall guy.
I would have said she was charmed more than suckered. I would have said suckered more than charmed.
Well, the fact, like when she was telling Long about like everything that what was his name? What was the guy's name?
Which one, the professor or the
No, not the professor. The other
Rasmussen or something.
Yeah, the one who sounded like Rasputin.
Yeah.
I don't know
Rasmussen, I think it was.
Rasmussen. Yeah, it sounded like Rasputin. I'm like, wow, that's a take on a name. That's gonna. I think it was Rasmussen or something, but it sounded like very close to Rasputin.
Yeah, Rasmussen. That's it.
Yeah. I was just like when you're saying, oh, and she's like, you know, I mean, she's being her age, right? She's being 22, 23. So at the same time, I wasn't too worried, like about that. But at the same time, they were kind of painting her a little bit to be this kind of streetwise person, and she really wasn't. That was my take on it. She got completely.
She was clever, but she wasn't streetwise.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe that's it. But not even like Rasmussen, like. I mean, we've all been taken for a ride, right? When we've been young, and we're like, you're like, oh my God, because you want to believe the best in people, but at the same time, she didn't do that with whatever his name, Rasmussen. I know the fact is, like when he said, oh no, you know, you've got to be no, there's nobody else to do it. I'm sitting there going, yeah, right. Like, can you not see where this is like? Of course, this is where it was going, but she still didn't like say that to Long. She didn't say, oh man, you know, he saw me coming, because that was really it, right? He saw her coming from a mile off. And I think she was just, for me, like, and I'm what I'm hoping is with the matching with Fred Fish, right? Was it Fred Rasmussen? I don't know who's who.
Fred Fish was the guy who was the
yeah,
helped.
I can't remember who was Fred though. It was Fred Fish, right? And
Fred Fish,
yeah.
Rasmussen was the one that came from the company she was working with.
But I couldn't remember what Rasmussen's first name was. I thought he might be
Fred. I can't remember either, because they just called him Rasmussen a lot.
Okay. I just thought that she's kind of had her ego, like maybe that would be, you know, being with someone like him who was quite street smart, like the fact that how he cleaned up long and everything, that might be good for her. You know,
it just felt like, to me, like her first job, whereas previously, while she was working for the professor guy, she knew she was being taken advantage of. In this case, she felt, I think that in this case, she felt like her ego had been stroked, because here she was now, she was being appreciated. And so she sort of trusted him in ways that she didn't trust the other guy quite the same. Yeah,
but yet at the same time, like, I was just sitting there listening to the whole story. I'm going,
Floyd was his name.
if you think you're not going to jail, you're going to jail. Like, you know, like, you can't tell me you were 22, 23 and didn't know. Like, the fact is that when he said you need to write it, there's nobody else kind of thing, you knew you were already, that was dubious. You knew that, and you did it anyway. So
that was her ego, though.
It was definitely ego, but at the same time, when she was talking about like right from wrong and like she having some kind of existential crisis, I'm still sitting there thinking, and she's like, you know, and the bank can take away your car and everything like that. You know, I'm sitting there going, maybe she's just fundamentally missing stuff. I don't know.
I just thought it was actually a very 80s point of view, honestly. Like,
maybe
I thought it was that really lack of understanding of how things are actually working in the real world, and the banks just have money and, you know, rob from the rich, and, you know, sort of, I felt like she had this ego and greed. She definitely had both of those to me. And she was young, right? And so she thought but she was very good at what she did, and so she felt like Superman, and that she could do this and get away with it. And it was only when things started to get out of control and beyond what she thought was acceptable that she started to go, hang on a tick. And which doesn't make her a good person by any means, very far from it. But I think that's one of the ways that people easily get led down these sorts of paths when their moral compass is not 100% straight and true.
And I mean, maybe that goes, I think maybe that was why the author wrote her to be saying, she wants to go consulting at like age 23, 24. It's a really egotistical thing to do, to think you could be up for that, to do it, because what she may have the skills, but what she doesn't have, which is what consultancy requires, is experience, like working for lots of different people in lots of different contexts and having lots of different situational stuff. That's, you know, that's why you get to that point. So but the other thing that was definitely why this was dated was she talking about how not having money, and it was interesting because that was where I was like sitting thinking, when was this written? Because if you really were a systems analyst, like depending on when this is, you should be fine. Like, you know, and she was talking about the business, whoever the business graduates were or something, and they're like, they would know it would be applicable. And that's why I didn't know when it was published until the end when they said, you know, copyright 1983. I was like, oh, okay, this is not a valued role yet, whereas God give you 10 years, even 5, you know, like it's,
well, she's actually skilled up at the right age, because in 10 years, when she's got a lot of experience under her belt, it's going to be the 90s, and boom baby, you're going to be making all the money.
Well, even at the end of the 80s, you know, like, you know, it was very interesting. You know, to me, just that was one of the other things I found really interesting, was this thing of going, not having money or whatnot. Yet there was this other thing, because this is why I had a hard time placing the time period, because they were talking about Rasmussen being this entrepreneur and having everything. I'm going, and they're in freaking San Francisco and the San Mateo Valley, and I'm like, nothing has changed. Like, 40 years on, and it's all exactly the same, entrepreneurs in San Mateo Valley. So I thought that was very, it was very funny to me. So
I agree. I was fascinated because normally I would feel like I would understand whether, like with something like this, I was like, I should be able to understand whether the technology was legit or not. Like I should, but I was like, no, this is actually too early for me to be able to understand. I can't place it. Like I don't know enough about tech from the 80s to be able to actually understand how legit all of this is. All I've got as a reference is Jumping Jack Flash with Whoopi Goldberg.
I love that movie.
It's a great movie. But it wasn't, that's what I was like, okay, you have to remember, Melanie, that the computers are looking like Jumping Jack Flash.
Well, that was the thing that made me sort of kind of, even though I sort of had looked at the date, I kind of hadn't really thought about it much as I was reading until they got to the part with the letter and they had to go to this particular type of computer to print out the letter. And I was like, why does it matter what it was typed on? I don't understand. But then I was like, like the old school printers with we used to have one with the dot matrix printer with the holes on the side.
And you'd rip them off.
Yep, all of that. Yeah.
And I was like, why couldn't they just do it on their computer at home? Oh, because they probably didn't frigging have one at home.
No.
But,
even just the fact that she didn't delete what she'd written, like she left it on there.
I was like, amateur fucking hour. Like I honestly, when she was talking about the word processor, I thought it was a physical but electric typewriter that she'd written the thing on. Because I couldn't fit, because I was doing the same thing. And then when Fred was trying to work it out, I have to admit that I was like you, Mel. I was just like, I don't know whether this is legit or not. Fine, I'm going with it. Like, I don't know, he's trying to break, like he's basically hacking his way in, and he had said he was a hacker. But I was like, and that's the same. And actually, you just talking about the Nowcast, and I'm like going, was it the printer or was it the computer had a particular font? Like, I can't work out which of the one now, because she was saying it's the word processor, but I'm like,
it was just that he would be able to tell that it wasn't done on the same type of thing, and I was like, that doesn't make sense. And
it could actually be the font too, because depending on the type of printer it was, it could be a printer that's very similar to a typewriter. It just does the actual printing for you from the document. So there's a lot of different types of printers around that time before we got our standards.
Font. Yeah, you never set the font. The printer had one font. Yeah,
exactly.
See, I'm a little bit too young for our first printer and computer would have been in the early 90s. So that's like 10 years later to what this is set. And I just don't have enough knowledge about what computers were like then.
I was at school when this was set, and there were no printers. They used to, and I don't know if you guys, Mel, you'll remember this because you're my age. It's memories and nostalgia. They would print out the newsletters and they would do it on this kind of I
know what you mean. The stuff that smells nice.
Oh, the smell. I love that freaking smell. Okay, you do know what I'm talking about. And I just
there's a name for it. I can't remember what it's called.
Yeah. But that was all the way they did that was all typeset. That's the thing. They sat there and put all the freaking that would be.
Although you could even do it by handwriting, because my teachers used to do it all the time.
Was that what they did?
Because I've talked to older teachers and they talk about how they had purple all over their arms because it'd be this big machine with a roller, so you'd make a template kind of like on an overhead, like a piece of plastic, like an overhead, and you'd write on it, and then put it through into this thing, and you'd roll it through this ink stuff. And the teachers would say they'd come out and they'd have purple all over them from doing running off.
I remember the color because it was beautiful, and I remember the smell because it was. I don't know what it was about that smell. I have to watch some YouTube videos to see it because I always just think.
Watch from up on Poppy Hill from Jubilee.
Oh yeah, okay. I might rewatch that. I own that somewhere, but I own it. But actually, it'll be on Netflix, so I don't have to do it anywhere.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, so I have to admit at that, but I was like, he's doing something hackery. You know, like
maybe I understood more than I realized about the technology then.
I think you did. I think
yeah.
he was talking about how he was trying to get in and do stuff or what he was
Yeah,
doing.
but I knew what he was doing then, because that's exactly the scene that I picture with the jumping jack flash, because they put in the little codes and things, because you didn't have a mouse or anything. You had to type everything in and you enter the right code and stuff.
It was like DOS. It was basically like you would be DOS
literally.
Code. Yeah.
I can't get that to work very well, but that's like
exactly that kind of thing.
Like it's a big roller. I only know about it because, well, like I used to have those worksheets when I was at school, but like I know more about how it's done because I've taught with teachers who were teaching when this was they were like, you shouldn't be complaining about the photocopier. Do you know what it was like when I was first teaching?
Yeah, but the photocopier smells awful. That stuff smells great.
Yes, because the smell's what matters.
And you can always tell when the teacher had run off the worksheets at the last minute, and then you'd come into class in the afternoon and they'd have just done it at lunchtime, because they'd hand them out and they'd still smell really strong, and you'd be like,
oh, kids today. Oh, they
will never understand.
Yeah, it's like that. I love always that thing of like a cassette with a pencil, and they go, kids today will not understand why these two things.
Yeah, why do these two things are important? Yes, that's why I used to love watching kids react on the Fine Brothers channel, because they would do those videos, and oh my god, watching them trying to use the rotary dial telephone was hilarious.
Oh, but let's be honest, rotary dial phones fucking suck. Anyway.
Oh, they did. They totally sucked.
Especially if you had to dial a number that you had to go all the way around.
That all the digits were at the other end, like a 9.
You'd look at the number and you'd look at the phone number you were about to dial and you'd be like, oh God, this is going to be painful.
It takes forever. And if you got it wrong, and
you'd have to hang up, start over. And I remember when we got to the little press button ones in Darwin, this was in the 90s, and I was just so happy. I was like, oh my God, this is just magic.
I know. We like the Americans and be like, like Babysitters Club, like what Claudia has. Yeah.
I'd sit on the floor of my mum's bedroom so I could use the second phone and not have to do it and talk to my friends in front of everybody.
I can still, when I first met Matt, we still had not a cordless phone in our house.
Yeah.
I can remember sitting on the floor in the lounge room talking to him on the phone, like with this phone, like, and it's like, and then Mum and Dad were like, well, we're not getting a cordless phone because we don't want you to talk to your boyfriend in your bedroom where we can't hear what you're talking about.
Your boyfriend that you met on the internet.
Oh yeah, they were like, he's going to be a serial killer because you met him on the internet.
All right, and he lives in Tasmania.
I know, that's where all the crazies are.
They're all inbred down there.
They walk around with socks and sandals.
God, such German styles.
And having to wait until after 7 o'clock to call each other because it was an FTV call.
Oh my God, yes.
Yeah. Anyway, back to the book.
Yeah, we just had a full.
Sorry, this is just an 80s reminiscing. That's
nostalgia of the 80s.
We're the correct group for this, really.
Yeah, we really are.
We just needed Matt, and it would have been perfect.
But this is why I read this thing. I was like, I think Matt would enjoy this on two things. One, he's, it has that whole computer stuff in there, and I think he would be interested in like from kind of like the historical piece, like it's written at the time. And I thought he likes it. He likes a mystery. So, I was just like, and I nearly was like, Matt, are you going to read this? Because this is totally up your alley. But
I just want to read, but he didn't.
He did start it. He did start reading it, but it's just, I think he ran out of time.
Yeah. No, fair cool. I mean, that's the thing. Sometimes you have to pick and choose what you're going to do and what's up your alley. So totally, I totally get it. But I love these little look backs. I'm actually really glad we did something a little older.
It actually got me reflecting on the fact that we do tend to read a lot of newer stuff rather than reading much older stuff. And it's made me sort of think I might pick something older for next year.
Well, next year, I did, on my own dime, I did Rendezvous with Rama. I think I told you guys, Arthur C. Clarke.
Yeah, you did, because it was almost the one you did. Because remember, we afterwards, we were like, we wish you'd picked it.
Yeah, because I did Pushing Ice instead, which I was like, oh, I'm so sorry, everybody.
But I also wanted to read Pushing Ice. Like, I remember when you were looking them, I was like,
it had good jacket copy.
Yeah.
It had a good jacket. Because I remember Elizabeth going, why did you pick it? I'm like, because it sounded awesome. It just didn't turn out that way.
Yeah.
Like, it sounds good.
The risk of reading books.
It could be great.
Yeah.
Like, they landed on an asteroid. that's cool. They're chasing after another, like this moon is raced off to be a spaceship. You're like, that's cool. What a cool premise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, it's just the person who executed it did a fucking bad job.
That's pretty much it. Like, and that's what happens. Like, I kind of regret my pick from this year, not because it was a bad book, but because I didn't feel like there was much chat out of it. Whereas I read another book not long after that was the one that I was also thinking about picking, and it was perfect for a really good in-depth chat. And I wish I'd picked it. It's the way it goes sometimes. So you don't know.
And that's it. I think what was really good about Pushing Ice, and we'll come back to the book in a sec, and is that and we actually did this already. We did this with the Tea with the Dragon tonight. Is that sometimes it also helps you figure out what it is about structure, about character development, about scenes and motivation, about pacing. And you kind of realize you have a lot of this, and sometimes it's like what's like tonight we were talking about Tea with the Dragon, and we all had the same experience, but you know, electronically and in the physical copy, audibly, and it was like it's so interesting when we're like, oh, we actually know quite a bit about how do you separate out scenes and characters. And you know, I've seen so many cool things over the years with that happening, like in the Neverending Story, you would actually rotate, you know, when you change from Sebastian to Atreyu, you know, it would actually, you'd physically upside down the book from memory.
Wow, I didn't know that. That's
it was
really
pretty
cool.
cool.
I don't think my copy does that. Maybe that was your special copy.
No, not all of them did, but the one we because we got read it at school, that it did that. And it was so cool. And then there was another, but I've read another version of it where they changed it from was it blue and black or blue and red? So the text color would change. And you know, when it changes from the world. Yeah. So in the world, sometimes it can do that. And I don't know if that was Neverending Story. I feel like it was, but I've seen that also done really effective, which I think is really cool. So you always know which world you're in. And that's why I think we've talked about that when you're reading like an ebook. Well, how do they do it? And sometimes they use a different font, you know, like the font changes or it goes to italic. So I think it's really interesting where it's like sometimes reading these books that aren't executed well, or there's some interesting editorial, you know, or layout type settings, you know, differences. And you go, what is it that we're expecting? Oh, we actually do know a bit, or it's like points to other things. Anyway, I just think it's really cool because you actually kind of realize, thanks to this club, we can actually nail down what it is, that why a book is not working as well as it could. And it's not a subjective thing. It isn't. It is actually something that comes from you know, best practice.
So, good practice and things along those lines.
So yeah, I actually really enjoyed reading this because I took back a couple of Carl Hastings, which I didn't get a chance to read, to the little library in the because I kind of done my time with Carl Hastings, but he wrote most of his stuff in the 90s, all set in Florida, and they're always really interesting reads because so they're the same things, like mysteries that turn into adventures, and they're all I don't know how to describe it. Often something's environmentally in peril because Carl Hastings is a massive environmentalist. Do you guys know the movie Striptease with Demi Moore?
Yes.
Have you heard of it? Yeah.
I've heard of it, never watched it.
Yeah. Well, don't bother. But the book it's based on is fantastic because it's his book. And I remember watching it because I was like going, oh, I've read this, and it's not the best translation of it. Like they don't have the blue tongue vowels, and it's like, but it was like so cool. And I remember watching it going, oh, they've kind of missed what it is about a Carl Hastings novel that makes it so like fantastic. And it's not that there's a stripper in this. They've made that the focal point. It just happened to be that it's often about a lot of characters who are working hard to try and make ends meet, who get caught up in, you know, the underworld or in an environmental type thing. So anyway, that was kind of by the by. But I always enjoyed reading those, and Kinky Friedman books as well. I don't know if you guys read any of those. No, probably definitely not Kirsten. I don't know if Mel had read any of that stuff. Is back in my.
Doesn't sound familiar.
A lot of mysteries, you know. Stephanie Plum, that kind of stuff. So.
Stephanie Plum, I know. Yeah.
Yeah. So I went through a whole big phase of enjoying those type of serialized, you know, books. same kind of lead character or characters. Yeah. What did you guys think of Mayland Long? Let's talk about the characters.
Well, we've talked about Liz, so that makes sense.
Yeah.
I like Mayland. I really, like I said, I really wanted to spend more time with him and Martha. Like I liked Liz, but I didn't really want to spend time with Liz. Like I appreciated her for who she was. I accepted her faults along with her positives, and I think that she was actually. When we finish after this bit, I want to talk about feminism. But I thought Mayland was very, very nice. I quite liked him. I didn't like. I was like fascinated and wanted to know more about the whole. Like that's the one thing I thought was like I felt like it could have been fleshed out was why he was human.
Yeah,
like
that's what I wanted to know. And what were the limitations? Like how human was he? Like obviously they sort of made out that he could sort of survive more than what a human could survive, but then he didn't seem to have any. Like did he have special? Like they were like, how did he get through that window? But then when he was trying to get away from the guy with the gun, didn't seem to be able to do anything that special apart from not die from bleeding to death as quickly as a human would. Like I was like, do you have special abilities or not? And can you change back into a I really wanted him to change back into a dragon and eat somebody.
I thought that's what was happening on the boat for a bit. I was like, what's going on?
I was like, well, is he permanently a human? Does he have, if he has some kind of abilities, then what are they? Like, I wanted that to be more fleshed out.
Yeah.
When I said at the beginning, like, I wanted more dragon, that's kind of what I wanted. Like, I wanted more of his backstory about how is he a human. And
I would have been very happy if this story had been written entirely from his perspective so that we could get more of that story and more of that what was going on. Because by the time you get into his head, you're pretty much so focused on Martha that there's none of that going on.
Yeah. I wanted more flashbacks of,
you
know, because I didn't feel like there was enough. Like he flashed back and then he talked about who it was that had given him his prophecy. But I wanted more of those flashbacks.
Yeah.
Like, and maybe that could have come with his time with Martha as he spent more time with her. If he, if he'd done that, you would have had these flashbacks of his life and everything he'd been searching for, she would answer. I feel like that would have been really good from a structural point of view and from a character development point of view. And also, like, that was the thing that I felt like it would be more dragony, like it almost like a flashback of him remembering himself in a different form and what he was looking for when he engaged with, it could have been really really interesting. But it's not that it's bad. I just think it just could have been a little bit more.
I find that a lot with like these novellas.
I guess we're looking for a fantasy.
Yeah. I think that's the problem with a lot of the time with novellas. You always feel like there's space for a bit more to have been done. And
do we know if this was the first novel from this author or an early novel and then they went on to have
as far as I can tell, they actually were pretty prolific. There's quite a bit. Yeah, I don't know if this is the first or not, but they seem to have quite a few books. So I'm just checking now. Usually the first ones listed are the most popular. She's got a lot more fantasy stuff going on.
Yeah.
So the Book of Kells looks like it came in 1985. Dominoes 1984, 1987. Yeah, so it might have been her first one by the look of it. I haven't seen anything earlier yet.
And that's interesting because we read a novella like the Sisters of the Vast Black a little while ago, and I think we all felt very much like it had capacity. There was a rushed ending, but for a first effort, good stuff. Like I want to read more from her. She's got very promising. So for me, I feel like it for what was R.A. I can't remember the last name.
R.A. MacAvoy.
If this was like one of the first efforts, I'm more than happy to read more from them because I think it was like there's so much promise. It's well written. The language is beautiful. The characters are well thought through. Good stuff.
Yeah. Oh, she won the John W. Campbell Award for Best New Writer in 1984. So this being published in 1983 means it was very likely.
It was one of the Well, then fair call. Like and that's the thing. Like we can want that stuff because we've experienced great writing, and we can almost like an editor. We can think what you could pull in, but it's a
Mm.
novella, right? It's and I think what she really wanted to explore in this was probably the mystery and the interplay of the characters, because I think she was, I mean, this is my take on it, is that, and this is the language thing that I wanted to talk about a little bit when it came to Malin Long, was one, that he had this anglicized name that I know that was a thing, but at the same time, I feel like, I don't know, that it would be fine for, and what was actually very good was what Fred actually said, is that your Chinese name, is Long your Chinese name, because that often happened, right?
Yeah.
So, and I thought that was actually really culturally sensitive of him for 1983 to, like, if
Exactly,
that's your Chinese
yeah.
name, I'll call
But
you
it
your
makes
Chinese
a lot
name.
of sense that he changed his name, because his name was Oolong, which actually means black dragon. So
Yeah. So and people would have felt weird calling him Ooh, maybe, like, because they would have wanted to call him Ooh Long, and it was Ooh,
and because
like,
it was such a common practice to choose a Western name, and he did say that he'd essentially integrated himself into Western culture as part of his move over there and following this prophecy that was.
So that was
the prophecy
really
part
interesting.
was the most light part. I was like, what was the prophecy bit about? I don't
And that's
understand.
why I wanted more flashback about that. Like, I
Yeah.
wanted more, like, there was just a couple, and then he talked about at the end with Martha, and that's the only bit that I feel like, if you'd spent more time and then you were talking about your form, that would have been like,
If the next book had been described as being the prequel to this one with and following just Mayland, I would have been like, yes, please.
Yeah. But I thought, there was a lot of that I don't think would happen today. The term Oriental as well.
Yeah, definitely wouldn't happen today.
The term, what else was there? A lot of skin references as well, which, so of its time, but I thought that the way he spoke, like, I couldn't work out whether, because I got the feeling he was only 6 years since he'd moved to since the
But
prophecy.
his languages were his specialty, though. So
right, but I couldn't work out whether he had, when he was taking back and forth on human form, if he had studied, because they said he had like a Cambridge accent or something. I don't know, but
he had what I would consider to be an educated accent, an educated
just because some of the
English.
language choices, and I thought it was very clever again, because he said, the boot of the car. A boot is a term that the Americans say trunk.
Think of that.
I noticed it because I was like, because she read him with a slightly affected British accent, so it had that like slightly Asian
sound.
Asianness. It was very well done. She did a very good job.
I think a lot of that had to do with who he's communicating with, because remember he talked about being in communication with like John Donne and things like that. So I think that his exposure to English was more British.
And didn't he say he'd been in Ireland?
Yeah, he said he travelled. So
there you go.
I'd say even though it's only been 6 years since he's been human, his exposure has been longer, and his integration meant that
sense.
He had a more naturalized accent. So.
But I enjoyed him as a character. And I totally get what you're saying, Mel, where it would have been, the whole thing from his perspective actually would have been equally as fascinating. You didn't even need to start with Martha. You could have just stayed with him. Like, I've been told to go and introduce myself to this woman, like I could have started with him showing up in the restaurant for dinner, and the bartender, saying you should introduce yourself to Martha, whatever her name was.
Martha McNamara.
I was about to call her MacAvoy, but that was wrong.
McNamara. The only reason I know that was because I happened to be looking at the blurb on the back of it. It actually is her name at the beginning.
McNamara. Yeah.
So can we talk briefly about Elizabeth and her feminism statement about her mother?
I can't remember. What did she say?
She basically was cranky at her mother for giving birth to her and giving up her career. I thought that was a very 80s harsh feminism viewpoint.
Yeah, I also didn't think it was particularly fair, because, I got confused by it, because then later on there was a reflection by Elizabeth where she was like, well, maybe she was telling Long about it, where she said her father left and stole everything, and so then her mother had to go from gig to gig and job to job. And I was kind of like, and she's like, I was kind of like, do you want your cake and want to eat it too because you're so egotistical that you want her to like I got very confused. I'm like, she has to do like what she can, like you understand that, and yet giving up her career. I was really confused. I was like, at what point in time are you angry with your mother? When she was with your father, who could have been a drop kick the entire time she was with him, but protected you from that, because you said you didn't know the situation until later.
Yeah.
Like what actually happened, and that might have been why. Or was it like when she was then a single mother and having to make ends meet and taking these odd jobs that you were angry with her? I was very confused.
I don't think Liz actually had what I would call a lot of emotional intelligence, and I don't think she's introvert, strongly in touch with herself.
No.
She's a very logical person, and I think that I think her emotions are conflicted between the feminist aspect that she has, which is very traditional 80s feminism, which is I've got to be the man and I'm going to be like super tough and emotionless about things and things on those lines. So that kind of feminism combined with her upset about the kind of upbringing she had, both because her father had walked out, but also because her mother had to work a lot, which obviously she had to do and she had no choice, and she feels mixed emotions about that. But also she doesn't like that her mum would have been amazing and awesome, and look what she's given up because of all of this.
I think that's a really it's a really accurate read, Mel, that I think her EQ, her empathy dial, her ability to understand and put herself in someone's shoes, it's kind of not quite there. And they did allude to that with the whole police officer thing, right? I think that I think that's a really fair read, because if she'd stopped to do that for a moment at any point in time, she might have been, to me, it seemed, in having met Martha at the beginning, Martha loved this vagabond life. Like, for her,
she was a free spirit.
That suited her. Like, that's what she wanted. She didn't want to be a concert violist. Is that right? Violist? Was she a
violinist? Violinist.
Yeah. And right, great. She could have been amazing and made lots of money, but that's not what made her happy. And I think you're right, Mel, to kind of go the EQ of not realizing that, because really, when you have a higher empathy dial on these things and you have EQ, you like at the end of the day, you want people to be happy. Yes, they like sometimes if they're not fulfilling like all their potential, but and maybe this is about her youngness as well, but this is why I get a little bit weird about that, like why she didn't have street smarts. She's brought up by a single mom, like,
but she was very single-minded even about herself and her own career. Like, she knew what she wanted and she was going to achieve the best, and she was going to be a wizard at what she did. And so I think that was her placing that expectation on her mother in her career, rather than recognizing what she wanted.
She did that right at the beginning too, when she was like, I'm going to fly her out and put her up in this fancy hotel. And the mother was like, I don't really like fancy hotels. I would have been happy with somewhere cheaper.
Yeah.
But she picked that place out because that was what she thought, was her way of being like, I feel guilty that I'm bringing her into this, so I'm going to put her up in the best hotel. But it was didn't even occur to her that isn't even what your mother wants.
No.
She doesn't want
but
to
I think it's fascinating that the author recognized that both of them actually loved each other very much.
Yeah.
Like, there was this clash, there was this disconnect, they weren't even talking to each other, and yet they quite clearly, once you got both perspective, loved each other. Like, at first you weren't sure about Liz loving Martha. Martha quite clearly loved her, but you weren't really sure about Liz until you got to Liz, and then you were like, oh, she really does love her mum. She just doesn't connect on her on the same level because they've got different interests.
I have to admit, when we met Liz, she was not what I was expecting from what everybody had said.
Yeah.
And from what Martha had talked about the relationship, I was expecting someone, like we've talked, a lot more street smart. You've been brought up by a single mum. Most people I know who have come from tough situations, like that, like, are pretty street smart because they've had to be,
I think that's because Martha had a view of her daughter being very competent. Like the way she talked
Mm.
about her was as if, look how wonderful is, look at how good she is at things. Like I think
Yeah,
that
but
we
so
had that
did
perspective for
everybody
a reason.
else. So did everybody else they interviewed. They all talked about how
But,
smart
I mean,
she
that's
was.
a pretty common thing people do, right? When they see someone who's super intelligent, they assume they're also street smart.
Mm. I don't know, just there was yeah, so this whole naivety that she had, like the fact, okay, here's the other thing that bugged me. Sorry, I know we're back on Liz, guys, but like at the end, and she said she freaking opened the door to Rasmussen.
Yes, what the hell? She thought she was safe. I'm like, even if you think you're safe, don't open the door.
Surely you have a peephole. Can you not at least look before you, like?
No, she opened it thinking he couldn't do anything. I'm like, what the fuck is wrong with you? You have been played. This guy has set you up. And yet you were like, oh, I don't like, is she so cocky? Like, is that the problem? Yet
yes.
I was so dumbfounded.
She doesn't,
by her. She was
doesn't
so terrified. And then I was like, what is, I was just,
she doesn't have the emotional intelligence to be able to read other people either.
Right.
And that's the problem. She is cocky.
But she couldn't even read
and
the
she's
situation.
good at what she does, and she's white and privileged and all of those things. And so she thought she was safe in this situation but doubly so because she can't read them.
I was just like, this guy, like everything you've told me so far, and you can't even see the wood for the trees. You have been played. You have been set up as the fall guy. You're telling me this, and yet, when that happened, I'm like, you never, like, why would you do that? The guy can manipulate you. Do not let him into your apartment.
Okay. It's kind of like the horror movie where you go down into the base, they go down to the basement and you're screaming
and
at
like,
them.
I was just in there going like, and like when he was like trying to figure out how he got in, and she said, oh, well, I let him in. I'm like I seriously want to say, what the fuck is wrong with you, woman? Like, I was just like, at that point, I was like, send her to jail. Like, at least the ladies in jail will knock some smarts into her.
Yes, she'll have to learn there. There's no choice.
Oh my God. I was so annoyed with her at that point. I was like, you know what? You deserve it right now.
I didn't think she didn't deserve. I thought she deserved to go to jail for what she did, regardless.
Oh, totally. I didn't think she necessarily deserved to die or be set up. That was definitely someone, but she deserved to, like the whole thing where they're going, oh, I hope she doesn't have to serve any jail time. I'm like going, I think she should serve some jail time. She's defrauded people. She's look what she's done. She's got no
mentality of it's a victimless crime, and it's
not.
It's not.
No.
And she's
but
like,
I think again that's the 80s. Like that's the 80s mindset about banks and things like that, right? It's very much like the 80s things. Yeah.
It's not realizing like, no, it's still people within it, and they'll suffer because they'll have to put up their interest rates to cover it. Like you don't understand what a business model looks like. But even if you're just saying, well, even if it's the bank's money, the people will still suffer at the end of the day. Employees' heads will roll. Somebody else, like that's the point. She's got no EQ, so she hasn't thought about it beyond. She's like, oh, it's not real. Like, nobody's going to be at fault on this. I'm like, that's not how it works. Like, anyway,
there's always some sort of repercussion down the track.
Yeah. So anyway, so I just need to get that annoyance about Liz because I
agree. I liked Liz, but it was despite her fault. She had a lot of faults, but I think I liked it. I think because I could see potential for her to grow. Like there was potential there. She was young. But she needed to learn, and she needed to learn from her punishment. Like that was part of it.
Yeah. Yes. So I like Mayland. Martha, I did really enjoy Martha. I did enjoy it, but
there wasn't much of her.
That was it. It kind of got cut off. You know what I mean?
I think because she got cut off, she actually feels a little Mary Sue-ish.
Yes. Good call.
Actually, no, not Mary Sue. What's the word?
I know what you mean, though.
The what's the girl what's the name girl that comes in and it's just
dream girl.
Thank you. She's a little bit manic pixie's dream girl for Mayland.
She is totally. That's exactly what she is. She's totally a manic pixie dream girl. It's exactly what she is. Oh.
What was the thing she said to him that
'Cause
made
she's
him
there
go,
to help-
"Oh,
and
you're
it
definitely
even
the one
happened.
now"?
It's a rose. She said it's a rose.
Oh, it's
Yeah,
the
and he
truth.
was like, "Mind
oh
blown."
God, it's the truth. Like
Yeah.
that's exactly what it is, right? That
Well, because he's been thinking so much and philosophizing so much for so long because he's so freaking old that to have that stated truth. But the only reason it worked, I don't think this is like Martha's like skill set. Oh my gosh, she sees the truth of things. I don't think it's that at all. She happens to be his manic pixie dream girl, so he listened when she said it, not when anybody else would say it. That was the key.
Yeah, and you're absolutely bang on. Like when you said Mary Cyrus was like, yeah, but then you got it, because I'm like, yeah, because it's about his, and that's why it could have been all from his perspective. It's his learning from her, right?
Yeah.
Which is what the Manic Pixie Dream Girl thing is about. It's like they
Exactly.
are there for the protagonist to learn the lesson and grow, right? So just so interesting. And again, like when she was being kidnapped and stuff, and I was like, again, there could have been more. Like there was only one scene of that, and there could have been
Pretty much, because she got knocked out a little bit after that. So
I know, but there could have been other bits and pieces. I think that was so interesting. But then they wanted to act like she might have been dead.
I think it would have been more interesting if Liz had been the one that had been kidnapped, and they, with the two of them working together to try and solve it along the way. But I mean,
I was enjoying
you wouldn't have gotten to get know
the
Liz so well.
mystery.
So yeah.
Yeah, but I think it would have been. I actually think, yeah, and then we wouldn't have. Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, look, it was a story I enjoyed. We're picking it apart at this point, where it still was an enjoyable story.
But it was it was good fun, and I enjoyed them. I enjoyed Fish. I thought he was great, and I liked. He was actually very well rounded. Like when they had him in the apartment, and then when he's talking to himself when he's trying to hack into the computer, I just was like, yeah, he's this is pretty cool. And I did think the whole thing though, where Malin Long had he going, why does everyone think I'm a private investigator? It's like, do you too think I'm a private investigator? I'm like, why else would you be there? Like, think about it. They're just, made an assumption.
Like, yeah, it's this woman you met a couple of days ago, and now you're suddenly investigating this thing
and know how to ask all the right questions, and and can put two and two together and look for clues. I mean,
what else are they going to think? Actually, going back to Fred for a second, one of the things that there was one thing that actually annoyed me about him, and it wasn't him but his personality per se.
The moustache? The 80s moustache?
No, that was totally normal 80s moustache. My dad still has his 80s moustache. I'm used to that. That's fine.
My dad does too.
Yeah, so
my
that's
dad's
fine.
Gone beard. He's gone full beard.
Oh, actually, to be fair, my dad's now gone full beard now, but that's a very recent thing. Anyway,
my dad too. It's a quarantine thing.
Oh no, my dad started doing it last year, but he took it off and then started growing it back. No. It was that Fish had the same marks and intelligence as Liz. To me, this was a deliberate setup for the romance element, that he had to match her. He had chosen a different path, but he had to be able to match her in intelligence of her career. Otherwise, they wouldn't work, right? And I was like, okay, come on. He doesn't actually have to be as good at computers to match her for them to be able to be together. It literally served no other purpose.
I took it to mean that she wouldn't respect him.
Yeah, but that's a problem I have. Like, I'm like, he doesn't.
Yeah, because she's still egotistical.
Yeah. But I'm like, but that would have been a good lesson for her to learn.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's my only nitpicky thing about him, really.
We've established she doesn't learn lessons because she learns,
Anyway, guys, I think we should wrap it up. We've got a few people who want to come in and say hi.
Oh, okay. Cool. But anyway, I enjoyed the book.
It was a good book.
It was a good book. I had fun,
Yeah. It was a good book. I would recommend it. Somebody was like, should I give it a read? I'd be like, give it a read.
It's a nice light read. If you're looking for something holiday, like side of the pool kind of read, I think it's a good one.
Yep, I agree. I would, like, if I had someone come over and they were like, hey, what's something I could read that's short and I'm only here for a couple of days, I'd be like, hey, read this one. It's good.
Yeah. I agree. Okay.
All right, then. Thanks, everybody, for watching. See you next time. Bye.